Hello, and welcome to the second roundtable discussion that will address the question, a V-shaped recovery, what does it mean for non-ferrous metals? I would like to welcome Sean Davidson, the founder and CEO of Davis Index, a price reporting agency dedicated to the recycling supply chain, who will moderate this roundtable discussion as well. At least some of you might have heard during the Ferrous Roundtable that was held earlier today that Davis Index's team of 50 plus experts based in the US, Canada, Mexico, India, Ukraine, and Singapore deliver over 1,300 price indexes from across the world. Over to Sean.
Thanks, Waliha, and good day to everyone attending, wherever you are. The wonderful thing about this format is we can all dial in from different parts of the world. So I come to you from Houston, Texas this week. We've got Susie in England. We've got Natallia somewhere in the CIS. She's going to tell us where she's based. We've got Sanjay in India. We've got Salam are you in Dubai today or Saudi Arabia? Where are you?
Dubai, always in Dubai.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is a fantastic panel for a non-ferrous discussion. Just before we kick things off, let me just quickly introduce everyone, and then we can jump straight into it. So I'll start with Natallia. Natallia is a senior trader and head of biz dev at TRM Group. For those of you that aren't aware, TRM Group is a very large company based out of the CIS region, which is a major player in non-ferrous trade. Natallia holds a degree in state macroeconomic policy, and she joined TRM in 2012, and she's been there, and she's been a trader there since 2014 before moving on to senior trader in 2017, so about 4 years ago. She's also an active member of the BIR and is on their non-ferrous board representing Eastern Europe. So she brings a really unique perspective, to non-ferrous trade. Most people aren't fully well versed with what happens in Eastern Europe. So I'm actually looking forward to hearing from Natallia as we plow through the questions. I'd also like to, let me introduce Susie next. So Susie is the Managing Director of Recycled Products Limited. I know her better as the president of the BMRA, which is the British Metals Recycling Association. She is also a member of the EuRIC recycling branch and a UK ambassador for the BIR. So Recycled Products, which Susie is the managing director of, is a ferrous and non-ferrous metal recycling company based out of the UK. Interestingly, she is the fourth generation of a family to own a metal recycling facility. So there's a lot of history there. And since 2016, she's been actively involved with all the trade associations. If you're ever at any of these conventions, she's a fantastic person to meet. So I implore you to please bother her. She is a font of knowledge. So, please feel, and one of the most welcoming people to speak to. So please go ahead and bother as much as you want. You have all our permission, not hers, maybe. I don't know. And then moving on to Salam. So Salam Sharif is an engineer. He's basically a civil and a metallurgical engineer out of Texas A&M, so not far from where I am right now. And he also did his executive MBA from Cambridge, Massachusetts. A lot of us know Salam because he's been, one of the pioneers in metal recycling in the Middle East, which was a very difficult market to grow a recycling business in 35 years ago, which is when he started the Sharif Metals Group. He's accomplished a lot since then. His business has obviously grown a lot since then. But, more importantly, again, like Susie, he's also actively been involved with trade associations, right from the BIR, I think he's the chairman of the Ambassadors Committee now with BIR. And he was also the driving force behind the Middle Eastern Recycling Association, which is called BMR. And I think he drove that for 10 years and now is the honorary chairman there. So he's put a lot of work into trying to bring some organization to that region. He's received several recognitions and awards. Again, another fantastic person to meet at any of the conventions. So we've got like this perspective coming out of the UK. We've got perspective coming out of Eastern Europe and Natallia, out of the Middle East with Salam, and then of course out of India and Southeast Asia with Sanjay, because Sanjay Mehta, apart from being the president of the Material Recycling Association of India, also heads the MTC Group, which is an extremely large ferrous and non-ferrous trading company, but they also own physical assets. They own smelters in India. So they are consumers of scrap and producers of alloy. Looking forward to that perspective. Sanjay, again, has been in the industry for more than 35 years, so sort of like peers with Salam. While Salam was building, recycling in the Middle East, Sanjay was doing it in India, and of course, growing trading offices out of the US, UK, and Dubai. MTC is not just in ferrous and non-ferrous, of course, they're also in ferroalloys, iron ore, coking coal. They manufacture steel billets, rebar. So it's a pretty large company. They also have an automotive dealership business in India, and if I'm not mistaken, they're the largest ferrous scrap purchaser in India as a trading company. So with the introductions, let's jump straight into the Q&A. And so just for everyone that is attending this session, please note that we have had a prior discussion, to this call. So we've prepared a couple of questions just to get the conversation going. But, feel free to send in your questions, any observations that you might have. All of you attending are also market participants. You all might have a unique perspective, a unique view. Please send them in. Please feel free to clash, debate the points that are being raised. But I'm going to jump straight into the first question, because when I read the first question and we discussed it, my first reaction, I had a huge laugh because it was, and here's the question, I'm going to read it out verbatim because it's fantastic, right? So the question is there possibly too much optimism, right? Too much optimism in the copper market, or does even a slow switch, a gradual switch to electric vehicles bode well for copper? Okay, so we're talking about, is there too much bullishness in the copper market? Has the world gone crazy, still crazy, or does this actually have some legs? And are we going to see gradual, steady support for copper pricing going forward? So I think this one, let's start with Natallia, and then we'll pass it on to you. We'll go in the same order that we did the introductions, just for this one.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Sean. So there are two teams right now. We have Team Bears and Team Bulls. So one is in for the copper market being overheated, and the other one is, saying that we're good, and this just shows the fundamentals that we have behind the market. I'm personally with the Bulls. I do think that there is a significant base behind the recent copper rally. There are lots of projects being named so far, like the infrastructure, the Green Deal, e-vehicles, so many of them. And each and every project would require more copper to go ahead. And if we are, going towards net zero by 2050, going with the Paris agreements, with the European Green Deal, by different evaluations, there should be a double of the amount of copper that is in the market right now. So we're at 30 million tons so far, so it should be 60 million. If we want to go ahead and meet these goals. So if that's the story, then maybe the copper market is not even optimistic enough. So maybe there's still room to go, but there are so many fundamentals.
Wait, so are you saying copper 15,000 is more realistic than 10,000?
No, I hope it doesn't. I hope it doesn't, because it's detrimental to many companies, like in the cash flow, margin calls and so on. So I hope not. But there are so many fundamentals behind it, except the demand itself. We have the Powell speech yesterday, so we have LME going down, then the Powell speech goes off, and the market changes. Then we have some Chinese government officials dumping in reserves into the markets. And you can never predict that. You can never predict what's going to happen on a government basis with the COVID. We're still far behind the vaccination plans and so on. So I think there is room to grow, but that's more of a long-term perspective. We saw a JP Morgan review lately, who said that we're done with copper rally for this year. So from now on, it's only going to go down going forward into 2022.
Okay, so I mean, you brought up an interesting point. So Susie, before we come to you, I think we can expand upon that, right? Basically this aspect that, I mean, look, Powell coming and saying something, Fed rate announcements across the world, right? I mean, those things are always moments that the algorithms will use to change pricing on the exchanges. We know that, we're well aware of that, right? I think obviously the big elephant in the room is, what is the impact of China putting out some of those reserves and sending it into the physical market, right? Because that obviously can have a detrimental impact on pricing. So, I mean, some of the notes that you read now from the traders that forecast primary prices, right, and cathode prices, I mean, that's their big concern, right? What is that volume that gets unlocked in China's market to sort of contain this price optimism, right? So, that's why some of them are saying maybe the rally's over. So Susie, any thoughts, related to that?
I think as Natallia said, it's been announced this week by the CEO of Glencoe that, by 2050, we're going to need 60 million tons a year. And we're currently at 30 million. So, we're definitely going to need the additional thing. If governments follow through with their plans to increase electric cars, wind, solar, etc., we are going to need a lot more, 4 times as more. Battery car at the moment will need 80 kgs of copper, whereas a combustion engine only needs 20 kgs on average. Same with wind turbines per megawatt. We need 15 tons per megawatt. UK alone, to increase what we've pledged by 2030, we're going to need 450,000 more tons. So, there's room, even if China do release some, we're going to need the copper. So I think the price will be stable. Obviously, if they release reserves, it's going to affect the price and we're not going to shoot up to the 15,000. And as Natallia says, we've got to be careful of that because it does affect companies' cash flows.
Right. Okay. So, Salam, Sanjay.
But one thing, Sean, so
yeah.
May I jump in real quick? So the one thing that I'm personally very careful and let's say doubtful about is, can we actually handle copper? I agree. We as an industry, consuming copper, selling copper, buying copper, that doesn't really matter. Are we actually ready for that growth? Because we've seen that, let's say in container shortage, a fast growth is a good thing, but for example, the container industry was not ready for that. So same with aluminum industry, the boom is good, of course, everybody was happy with the aluminum industry booming, but then you have the semiconductor shortage. So there's, growth is good, but you need to make sure that we are actually prepared for that.
So I think, I think that's a really, let's jump into that, right, Salam and Sanjay, because both of you, you trade large volumes. Let's talk about the container shortage. Obviously, the container shortage was triggered by the fact that, when COVID hit, the shipping lines actually took out containers from the, from the supply chain, and they haven't been able to add them back fast enough. It's just like the airlines in a lot of countries, right? So, to her point about, is the industry, do we have the infrastructure, right, to support a doubling, right, of copper units in the next 30 years? So, Sanjay, let's go to you first. You move a large volume, right? How do you feel the industry's position for this?
Regarding container shortage, Sean, we have seen in last 1 year that freight cost has doubled, or say 3 times. Somewhere it is more than 4 times also. From Singapore, you can take a bit of container, will freight you 40-foot container more than $4,000 to India. So it's huge cost nowadays, 3 times almost. And this cost will not go down. The shipping lines profits, we have seen it, CMA, CGM in billions of dollars. So now they got the taste of the market. So they are not going to release or say go down with the freight cost. This freight cost is going to remain. Like example, LME has gone from $4,500 to $9,300. People are buying copper. People are not waiting that LME will go down to $6,000 and then I will go and buy the copper. So same like that. That even though also people are buying containers from UK, from USA, from Singapore. So freights are actually freight cost has actually taken into the cost, and now ferrous also, previously it was $300, now it's gone up to $525. So it's already counted in the cost. So freight cost will not go down. As far as India is concerned, because of the new second wave, it's definitely affected our productions, our requirement, our future plans also, everything. But yes, we are recovering, and everything looks very much positive in India side, very much positive.
Okay. So Salam, coming to you, you process scrap, right? Let's talk about Natalia's question, right? In terms of physical infrastructure for processing the scrap, the supply chain stability required to ship that scrap around, how do you feel we're positioned for this growth that most people expect?
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate getting the ladies to speak first. It makes it easier for the guys to follow.
I'm just polite like that. What can I say?
No, absolutely. It does me a lot of favor. So in the meantime, let me just hit on copper a little bit before I come to the logistic questions. Now, copper retains its undisputed, undefeated title as Dr. Copper, as it used to be called. Now it's dubbed as the precious metal. It is envisaged to really replace oil and gas. And why is that going on? It's just the Paris Agreement, which is binding about 190 nations to be signatories to that treaty. With the green energy moving forward, it is really putting a lot of emphasis and pressure on major economies to really abide by the decarbonization commitment and the green economy. However, we do realize that such a high demand really falls into the fundamentals, and I wouldn't say that how sustainable that is. Looking into the fact that if you want to think to go green, there is a big cost into it, because whether you want to generate the green energy or even store it or transform it or even distribute it, it needs the good old copper conductivity, and it is indispensable to use any other metal. So from that particular angle, I see that it is just going to be bullish all the way. Now, I don't know if we'll see $15,000 or $20,000 in the 2025 as some of the traders imply, but I can say one thing here. There is an acute demand in the fact that China has been through a transformation of its economy from a net exporter to net importer. Now we see also that on the electric vehicles, which is the main going forward now, not only in China, but in the rest of the world, and in particularly China, because they put a lot of emphasis on the decarbonizations and having even put a lot of if you like, subsidies as well as initiatives and increments into getting any car moves into Beijing capital. If it isn't an EV, it will not have the accessibility. So from that commitment, you see the demand is going only up. Now, if I look into the fundamental supply, I also have to look into the fact that now expanding a copper mine, apart from the investment involved, it takes you about 4 years around that figure hovering. If you will establish a new mine, it takes you up to 8 years. Now, there is an absolute acute shortage for the next 2 years to bridge the gap and the demand for the EVs and the green energy. And if that does not get really putting up the prices high, it will not generate the volume. And with that,
why let's talk about that for a second. Why if I'm a consumer, why do I need to raise the prices more? I mean, there's only that much supply available, right? There's only that much scrap available. It's not like, you know, tomorrow we're at $15,000 scrap, suddenly there's going to be more copper scrap coming out. There's only that much scrap that can be recycled. There's only that much physical infrastructure, right? So why should a consumer raise their price? I mean, you know, the material is, it's a finite supply, right?
Well, the recyclables, I understand they're limited quantities and they'll find their way no matter what the price is. But if you have a higher price as a recycler, I tend to put a lot of focus on the item that makes me more money. And
of course you do. I wish we had a buyer on this call.
Well, I mean, to be honest, if you make whatever margin you do keep on your sideline, if the prices go higher, then that margin goes into your bottom lines, unlike when you do the same margins on lower commodities. So what I'm saying with that kind of demand and shortage of supplies, and realizing the fact that with the commitment of having to go into zero carbonized economy in the near future, there is an all the way commitment, not only from China, India, Europe, Germany, and all the rest of the world. They're kind of committed with that Paris Agreement. And that's puts a lot of emphasis on the, if you like, regulatories and the governance more than a trade related. Now, how to move that around, as we have seen now with Chinese have stopped a lot of exports from being mainly, if you like, they were mainly importing a lot of scrap from rest of the world, and they were an exporter. So the containers used to come back empty. Now with having that traffic being slowing down, you wouldn't believe that exporting a container from China up to Europe, it cost about $6,500, which has never been the case before. So that does put a lot of restrictions of movement of the scrap metals worldwide.
Right. So, I mean, so Natallia, since you raised it, I mean, what do you see as solutions? I mean, and this kind of ties into that overall question about China and aluminum too, right? Like, we discussed this earlier, right? Like about evaluating the extent of the aluminum overcapacity in China, and China putting restrictions. Obviously, there seems to be a lot of issues, right? Like container supply to China. How much supply does China have of domestic material? The sort of erratic pattern to purchasing in China now, right? Like, how do all of these things tie in for you as a shipper? Going, okay, fine. It's getting more expensive to trade, correct? Because material price is going up. How do I raise cash flow? What do I do as a business to bring in some stability to logistics and things like that? I mean, what are the big problems that you're already trying to solve for trade? Let's say 2 or 3 years out.
Yeah, so like we're located like in Belarus. So like the nearest, let's say, shipping ports for us would be St. Petersburg and Klaipeda. And like, when you started talking about the containers, I was thinking about the good old days when shipping a container to Shanghai would cost like $600, which was nice. I mean, of course, LME levels were low at that point, but still, right now we're paying somewhere around $3,000 for a container. I mean, again, so when you face that out with the price of the raw material that you have, which is higher, it doesn't really hit that much. So, but the container availability, I mean, it's so detrimental for the development of the business. Like for some areas, not for CIS, for example, for our area, but like if you say far east in Russia, where you have Vladivostok as the only way to the world economy, and getting a container can actually be like a do business or do not do the business, and it should not be like that. We as business owners, as companies operating in the sector, we have like a million questions, to solve, like cash flows, prices, sales, supply chains, and so on. And like container shortage should be the last one that that need to be your daily headache.
Yeah. So Susie, what do you see as solutions to this? I mean, I'm sure you're facing some of the same sort of like issues, right? Like what let's talk, instead of describing the problem, I mean, we're all acutely aware of the problem. What are some of the solutions? What does the industry do now? I mean, you and Salam and Sanjay are on associations, I mean, what are there, like, do we come together as an industry and lobby for policies? Do we go after, shipping lines? I mean, what do you see, Susie, as solutions?
I think one of the solutions that I see will come from innovation, and that probably there won't be so much copper used, and there'll probably be more of a switch to aluminium. In the UK, we have quite a lot of aluminium foundries, whereas we don't have a single copper smelter. I do believe, and Sanjay can correct me on this, that in India, 80% of their cables are actually aluminium cables. I know the conductivity isn't as good as copper. I think it's something like 62%, but it's a lot lighter. So as long as you can accommodate the extra volume, it makes a lot lighter product. So I think maybe there might be a bit of a switch to more aluminium rather than copper requirement by the industries, I think. And also it's a quarter of the price, isn't it? So.
Right, and substitution has always been, one of those things that innovation drives, right? And price has always been one of those things. I mean, EC wire in the US has been around for a while, right? I mean, a lot of the solar, panels use EC wire and things like that, So, but I think, yeah, I mean, that's a pertinent point, right? I mean, that's extremely valid. Substitution will maybe contain some of that availability. So from a supply perspective for copper, but also the price optimism. What do you see as solutions to the logistics nightmare, Susie?
Well, us being an island, we have to rely on shipping. We have to fill containers. The problem we have, and I guess we're going to discuss it earlier, is that the European Union are currently trying to restrict exports of waste, of which unfortunately non-ferrous metal is still classed as a waste. So we're having to address that. So I guess your question about us lobbying, we are going to be having to lobby as a global organization to combat protectionism basically within our industry.
And Sanjay and Salam, Sanjay, when you're talking to the shipping lines and you say, hey, listen, what, we need more containers, like we need to alleviate this problem. I mean, what is the feedback you're getting from the shipping lines? Do you see some solutions maybe in 6 months, do you see this getting better in a year? Like, when does this get better for us as an industry?
Sean, we need to understand this. Frankly, do we have an option for Google? You have option for Google?
Don't. Yeah, we've got Bing. It's not very good, but it's there.
No. We don't have option for Google. I'm sure the kind of services Google provides us, no one has an option of Google as of now. So 3 major shipping lines are occupying share of over 70% in the world: CMA, MSC, and Maersk. So we don't have option for that unless and until people, some of the this big giant company comes in the shipping line business, invest it, and it will take another 4, 5, 7 years to gear up all around the world, infuse the containers, everything, and it will take much more, not even 7, 10 years. It will take much more time. They took almost 50, 70 years to come to this juncture. I don't think so. We have any kind of option on the availability of the containers or on the reduction of the freight. Of course, in next 1 year of time, they may provide, they are purposely not providing number of containers. Let me be honest with you, so that surplus containers cannot move to China, surplus containers cannot move to Africa. From Africa, I was used to get containers at the cost of $600 to India. $600 to India, it's almost 3,500 kilometers, or say miles. And I was getting at $600. Now the freight is $2,500, $3,000, even though containers are not available. So purposely they have moved out containers from their market. So the and freight cost has gone up. I don't think so that container freights will go down. Situation will improve, but no other countries in the world have a solution for containers or the freights in the world. We have to live with this situation. We have to live with this situation.
Salam, any thoughts on like how do we solve this logistics issue? Do you see any bright lights, at the end of the tunnel? Do you just think it's going to be dire for a while?
Well, we also have to see that all the logistics and shipping companies are in the business to make money as well. And what dominates the factor is that there is a supply and demand. Times when the containers had to be repositioned for an export cargo from China used to go for as little as $100, which is you pay more for the terminal handling charges than the freight you pay from Dubai to China. But those days have gone. With the transformation of China to being a net importer than exporter, I believe that there's got to be either a cost factor that we have to carry it into our expense and day-to-day business. And if we just can't afford it, we just got to have to look for different homes for it. And one of the best ideas is to recycle at home. Sometimes it looks so bleak, but however, it does embed some good news involved with it. If you have the opportunity to recycle at home and find next to your recycling plant a mill that absorbs your supplies, it's going to be a happy family. If you don't do it by your choice, maybe the regulators or the decision makers in the country will apply some levies to make sure there is enough supply flow to the local mills. So if you take a shortcut and really tie up with a local mill around the corner, I think that will be the way that I suggest it can overcome all the, until the dust settles down and things go back to normal.
But I think, Salam, also the flip side of that is the fact that like countries like China, right, have improved the quality of material that you can ship there, correct? Which by default mandates now that shippers in the US and Europe will have to upgrade the material a little bit more, right? Obviously, we know that some of that material is going to India, it's going to some other countries, right, like Pakistan, where they're processing it now and shipping that ingot to China. But obviously, and Malaysia is doing that, right? But Malaysia is going to introduce some of the same, like similar guidelines that China did. So even like in terms of like importing country mechanisms, we're seeing regulation move towards where countries are going, hey, listen, why don't you recycle the material where you generate it, right? And send us, let's call it a furnace-ready material, right? Or a furnace-ready.
If I may jump in, Sean, it is not too long ago, but it was in, I think, 1994, when we used to ship a lot of the batteries back into Philippines who were making the largest manufacturers of batteries out there in Philippines. And then the Basel Convention kicks in, and here you need the polyethylene sheets, you need the shrink wrapping, you need the acid, you need the export and import license. And you know what? We cut the long story short. We had our battery recycling unit, and that is a smelter that reduces the, after crushing and separating all the batteries, getting the electrolyte and getting the plastic recycled out. We were supplying the 99985 lead ingots into the rest of the world as clean material. We had vertical integration and we made money on it. And when it wasn't a very good market, we found the local battery manufacturers around the corner who were importing from, you know, the other side of the earth, and they found it also handy. So, you know, again, this is a model that you have to adapt.
No, I understand that the industry will adapt, right? But okay, so Susie, let me ask you, right? 4 generations of scrap, right? Recycling. I mean, what do you feel is more likely to happen? Do you feel that countries will have to recycle more domestically before they export, right? So more furnace-ready production of scrap, maybe secondary ingot in Europe and in the US before. Basically, do you see? I'll summarize this another way. This current opportunity of countries like India and Pakistan and Southeast Asia bringing in the scrap that China didn't want, upcycling it, and then selling that finished product to China. Do you see this as a momentary opportunity, which will make way to, you know, source regions like Europe and the US actually doing it themselves? Or do you see this as a permanent solution?
I think there's always people in our industry are entrepreneurs, aren't they? So I think if they feel that there's money to be made, then they will do it within their own country. If it's more profitable for them to carry on shipping, and as we were saying, at the moment we've got very high costs on shipping, but you know, if that resolves itself and more containers become available, then it makes it more economical for people to carry on shipping. It's all going to depend on the legislation that's brought in. You know, we may have to do it in-house, you know, within country. That's sort of where we're at, really.
So are we, I mean, are you saying the industry is pro legislation? I mean, are we welcoming legislation? Are we welcoming people that, I mean, let's face it, governments still call it waste in most countries, right? I mean, are we open to the idea that they don't understand the business, but they're going to regulate it further?
Yes, I think they don't understand the business. I think, you know, as quick as you were saying, we can ship furnace ready stuff. So if you have OA, say, or you've got any copper tube, etc., and you're ready to ship, that is furnace ready, but that's still classed as waste here in the UK and Europe. So until we can get that changed, which they don't seem very keen to change, I think we're in a sorry state, really.
So what's interesting is we've got a lot of comments flowing in. So I think, like, let me just let's run the first one by Natallia. So we have a person that has offered an opinion saying, I look at copper having its historic run, and I'm fearful of the last cycle where professional traders bought copper as a shift from equities to commodities, which tends to happen. And now with a shift because of monetary stimulus. So I think he's asked for your thoughts on this. I guess he fears that maybe, has this run out, right? Like, what are your views on this?
Well, there were a lot of views of, are we going into the super cycle, or is it just a temporary thing, as favorite traders joke for May, sell in May and go away, right? But I think that, there are a lot of fears of, how fast is it going forward rather than whether it is going forward. Because I think on like a larger scale, we do agree that, we're going further with the copper, and it's just a matter of, some say it's going to take you 6 months, some say that it's going to take, 5 years up to 2025. So.
Okay.
But I think like many traders and participants in the copper market are actually relieved that, we're not headed straight into towards that, super cycle, because as we have just discussed with the panel, that we are possibly not ready with the infrastructure for that yet.
Yeah. I mean, I just, personally, I hate it when, like mainstream media folk and, these guys riding on, commodity forecast basis fundamentals that someone else has put together in a model, come up with these rubbish words like super cycle, and it just becomes like this trendy word, and then suddenly it's just like everyone's using it, and with very little sort of like for most people, right, very little background on what's actually driving things right now, right? Because the fundamentals, for example, for copper are going to be quite different from some of the other physicals. So I mean, we have an interesting comment that has come in where this gentleman here says, recycling is an excellent idea to maintain sustainability, but it must also consider the quantities of gases and thermal emissions and electric consumption, which is extremely valid. And he goes on to say, I think the environmental issues should be preserved, so the companies that design modern technologies for recycling must keep this technology. And I think that's a point that everyone will agree with. So thank you for sending that in. Another question, I think Sanjay, you can take this. It's a question specifically for India, and it says, what if India starts manufacturing containers and shipping them out with material as well, just like China has in the past, resulting in great freight rates for India? So,
Sean,
Sean, that's the solution to the question that you just asked to Susie. What are we going to do about, China being from the net exporter into the net importer? So that's the solution. We just do it the same thing in India.
So let's ask Sanjay whether he thinks it can actually happen in India. Sanjay?
No. Frankly speaking, I will not put my own company will not put hands into the container manufacturing. It's not our cup of tea. And yes, our good friend, Mr. Jain Nathani, was manufacturing more than 30 years back. They were manufacturing of the containers, Nathani containers. But then they went out of the container business. But yes, this opportunity can be taken by some of the industrialists. But India is having abundance of opportunity pipelined in India for next 10, 20 years. You know very well India is going to, I'm going to say India's policy, good government, good policies are coming up. So there are many lucrative business opportunities are already available in India, and there are on the recycling platform. Government is trying to give more than 20 commodities for the people. So of course, container manufacturing can be one of the subject, but definitely if people can take the interest, it's their job and useful. But like what China did, China was having a lot of business, a lot of other commodities to ship back. India has not came back on the exports front, a lot of exports front so far. So after 10 years, 7 years down the line, if we talk same thing, yes, India will be able to do that. Still,
I mean, I think, and Sanjay, I think that's an extremely valid point, right? It's not about, so Sarthak, I mean, it's not about manufacturing the containers, right? I mean, you have to have the goods to fill the containers to ship them. I mean, China is the world supplier of everything from plastic straws to, to electronics, right?
India,
so I mean,
India will export to the worldwide after 10-15 years. Still our requirement is not fulfilled, so we have to fulfill our requirements by importing a lot of things from the other countries. So it will take much more time, Sean.
But 10 to 15 years, in the grand scheme of things, is a short period of time, and that's a fantastic sort of goalpost to move towards. So I think it bodes well for India in the next 10 to 15 years, right? So a lot of comments have come in around the container and logistics conversation that we were having, and I think one of the interesting things here is this point that one of the market participants has said, our issues with shipping have centered around inconsistent shipping schedules and unreasonable detention and demurrage charges, which I think all of you have probably faced, right? Shipping costs are always factored into our margins, so we discount them for pricing, which again seems extremely, pertinent. Now, I think let's talk about something. I mean, oh my God, it's just like flowing in now. But okay, let's just talk about something very quickly. So obviously, we all know what's happened in the past 12 months with COVID and things like that. But I think one of the most interesting things that has happened in the last 10 days is these outbreaks of COVID again, for example, in southern China, which has again shut down some ports, these lockdowns that are again holding back containers, right? So let me ask you this. As companies that ship, material, how are you preparing? How are you planning for this? Is there anything that you can do? I mean, do you hedge container freight? I mean, like what can a business do today? Because there's no way of predicting that, there's going to be a COVID outbreak, correct, at a port that's going to shut down now for a week or 2 weeks and hold back containers and delays. And, you're going to be saddled with all these detention and demurrage charges. So how do you as a business prepare for it? I mean, I don't know who wants to take this first. Maybe Susie, do you want to give it a crack first? And then we can, okay. We'll come to you second, Natallia. Let's go to Susie first this time.
Yeah, I think the thing is with the new import restrictions that China has been imposing on the quality, etc., we have all looked for different markets. So we're not quite so reliant on China now. And currently we can, in the UK, you can sell within the UK some of your products, or we can ship to Europe. So I think we're getting used to finding alternative markets, and maybe COVID has helped us with that, some areas are in lockdown and some aren't, or there's problems. So I think, with the UK, we've probably looked a bit more to European markets.
So diversification of sale. Okay. But Natallia, I mean, coming back to that question of to Susie, I mean, even if you diversify, I mean, there's no predicting that, the Amsterdam port might not shut for 2 weeks because there's been an outbreak and there's going to be a sudden stoppage, right? So how do you as business prepare for that, Natallia? Any guidance that you can share, any tips?
Well, Susie made a brilliant point, because that's exactly what we have been doing. Like, we don't really look towards local sales too much, because mostly our company, for example, is a net exporter. But right now we're looking into local sales in Russia, in Ukraine, and Belarus, in Europe as well. But luckily for us, the thing is, and unfortunately this may not work for many countries, we're located at a point where we can easily diversify the shipment ports. So like the closest one that we have to Belarus is in Lithuania, but in close proximity we have Poland, we have Latvia, we have Russia. So we have a bunch of different ports, which maybe you will have to pay higher costs for it, like first dragging the container into the port, then the actual shipment. But instead you can avoid, sitting in the port for a month, for 2 months, just waiting for that vessel to arrive.
Okay, so Salam, I mean, what about like companies that don't have that choice, right? Like, what if you have to ship to China or you have to ship to India and the ports are shut? How are you preparing for that? What can you do?
Well, what we have done, and when we were shipping most of the non-ferrous out of the region, we had shipped like 1,000 TEUs a month, and we couldn't afford having an off and on sporadic rates quotation. So we had tied up with major shipping lines, and we had like a retainership contract where we said, hey guys, we can secure for a certain sector, suppose like 300 containers a month, to the other sector 200 containers a month, and we do a contract for almost 6 months. And that's what we have done on the long term, and we had locked in the freight cost back then. Now post the COVID and during, we didn't have that volume, so we had to really do it on a smaller scale. And after all, I mean, if we don't have the proper outlet and logistics, we will not really get into that business and start being under the mercy of quotations. And I mean, we've had containers locked up at ports for almost 6 to 8 weeks, and has really tied up your finance. So if you don't have a clear passage and a green light, we would mind our volume and look for a nearby home for it within the region, which involves simple transportation. Other than that, I think one has to be wary not to really go and chase the volumes, and be content. After all, we have learned through the COVID that don't chase the last penny of your money. Just look after your family, your safety, and your health. I mean, you looking into what India can do about making containers and supplying a lot of electricity to the EVs. I'm of a different opinion. Now, we all have learned our lessons during the COVID that health comes as number one, then wealth. Now, with that, if we realize that we ought to take care of the infrastructure that will supply enough ventilators to our patients, electricity supply to the hospitals, as well as to the urbanized, I would say, areas which have no electricity, I would focus on supplying that infrastructure rather than going for the EVs and getting that entire slogan going above our head, which sometimes I don't know whether it's a political issue or a really business or a commercial issue. Now, within that content, I would say we just gotta, I mean, if you like, we can bite what we can chew, as the old adage, and simply deal within the means of where you can afford and maneuver your volume. Otherwise, you get stuck up in finance big times.
Okay. Sanjay, yeah, you're on. Sanjay, your mic is on mute.
Sean, two things in this shipping markets because of this freight situation and non-availability of the containers have came out. That domestic arising, like Europe is having more copper or aluminium, or say US is major supplier of the copper or aluminium. Those countries' domestic productions, if it is good and they are having a good availability, definitely those producers have an added advantage of getting the materials on site at a cheaper rates, from the 2 cents lower or 3 cents lower or 5 cents lower than I'm getting it India at 5 cents higher cost. So that is advantage for domestic players. If the countries like Africa, they don't have choice to domestic consumption, they have to move up the material, whether it's 7,000 freight or whether it's 4,000 freights. Definitely the cost, it will take the cost of the material. Cost will take care of the material. So I don't think so, because of the freight, business will stop it. Business will shift to the domestic, for the domestic outlets, and definitely domestic outlets in the generation country is getting the advantage. Maybe in maybe Europe or UK or say USA, those are having added advantage to get the material at cheaper cost. Cheaper cost means to say minus freight.
Right. So it's interesting. So all of you are in agreement that, diversification will mean growing your domestic markets, and sort of like markets closer to you. So I suppose the next sort of like logical question then is, does that mean that we're going to see an increase in domestic ingot production in these countries, right? Are we going to see new investments being made because now companies will go, hey, we've got more scrap in the US, more scrap in Europe, maybe more, like being held back, or, current trade flows mean that domestic opportunities exist. So do you think we'll see new investments in these regions for smelting? Susie?
Yeah,
Natallia?
I
like how Natallia always puts her hand up. So yes, okay. So Natallia, you go first.
I just wanted to comment that, what we see in our area, so the CIS historically, like it's coming back from the Soviet Union. It's an economy that was built to be self-sustainable. Like as much as we are going into the global trade and, the benefits of exporting, importing on shady times like that, and we saw that a lot during the COVID, the Russian economy sort of shrinks in a little bit, and it operates domestically, and it actually does help a lot, on times like that when you have like COVID spreading fast in some area, so you can't really ship a material there, or you have this container shortage, and it actually does help the economy to sustain itself. So no matter, how bumpy it is going all around in the world, if you have the outlet for the material, which is within the economy, it's the development that doesn't stop, because it's easier to regulate like the general policy if it's industrial or if it's macroeconomic. And like there are a lot of talks being about that in Europe right now, and I'm sure Susie will be better to comment on that. So maybe this is a way out. And of course, it's all about capacity. Like, can you actually handle that volume of importing, exporting, and so on? But it might be not that bad of an idea.
But Susie, you mentioned, right, like no smelting for copper units in the UK. Do you think that will change now? Do you think that someone might actually consider that to be a viable investment?
I think we are going to have to, as Natallia says, the COVID has brought that home, that we don't have things within our own countries. The thing I fear is that perhaps the EU Commission or my own government will legislate that these products can't leave the countries, and I fear then that the competitiveness and innovativeness of our industry is going to be severely crushed, because in the absence of mature circular end markets, that there'll be no free and fair trade, which is pivotal in allowing us to grow and for our prices to be set at a fair rate. So that
surely, but what is so what are the governments saying? So if the government say, hey, you can't ship the material out of the UK, correct? There's all this scrap that at the end of the day needs to be recycled and smelted, and the UK doesn't have the capacity to do it. Are you telling me that there's a strong likelihood of state-owned, secondary brass ingot production? And
it's not particularly.
It did work on steel.
but within Europe, it's a definite thing that's happening at the moment, that they wish to keep all waste, which is, we've said earlier, while we're still defined as waste, is going to stay within Europe. So they're going to have the capacity, but then we all know that if there's loads of supply and little demand, because we don't have the actual capacity, then the prices fall. And then, are the businesses sustainable? So it is concerning. Governments may want recycling to be encouraged, but it needs to be a worthwhile business at the same time.
Okay, so we've got about 5 to 10 minutes left in this discussion, and I think what we can do is let's tackle this one. So, and it kind of like it'll help us bring this conversation full circle. So basically, with the start of COVID, and this is a question that's coming from one of the market participants and attendees. He says, with the start of COVID, there were numerous theories, right, of whether we were going to see a V or W or L-shaped recovery. There was big demand for metal from China, but that seems to be petering out now, right? The same thing happened in real estate in major economies, which real estate markets seem to be cooling off a little bit. So his question is, are we sitting at the tip of the iceberg with demand slowing down? Or to put it in a different, slightly different manner, what shape are we in, right? Are we in a V? Are we in a W, or are we in an L-shaped recovery for, let's call it non-ferrous commodities? So let's start with Sanjay this time, and we'll end with the ladies. So Sanjay, what do you think? Are we in a V, W, or L?
No, definitely we are on the V-shaped recovery. I don't see any problem in the future also. And as far as because of the, I will talk about India itself. That we definitely lost many lives, lost good business, and good amount of time has gone back. So now definitely we are geared up, and countries coming back. This time the second wave has badly hit our rural villages, and that is the main 70% of the market lies with the rural area. So now it's coming up slowly. So we are sure that vaccination drive is also on. So I'm 100% positive after August month that business is going to boom like anything. Not in India, worldwide also I can see good future. And every country has infused good amount of money into the business, into the system, free kind of salaries, perks, everything has been given. Good infra projects are also launched. So I don't think any kind of problems in the future. Also next 2 to 5 years, good amount of business is going to come up from every country.
Okay, Salam, V, W, L, some other shape, S, I don't know, boomerang.
Well, my first and last name starts with S, but I will not take that letter, neither V nor L nor W. I think I will give you a letter which is U.
Okay.
So I'm more of a U shape, because now having survived through the COVID, it took us a little bit of respite just to really pick up our, if you like to lick up our wounds from the casualties of COVID. Those of you who lost dear ones or family members, we all feel sorry and heartbroken really for having lost their lives. It has given a lot of message to everybody, including us in the recycling business, that we gotta look into long-term stability. Family comes first. Your workers, co-workers, your associates are your assets, not the money-wise. So it is more of a U. A lot of people, recyclers, had to readapt their business models, their complete philosophy into how to be prepared over the next few months. Now, having gone through the vaccinations, with the rumors that there are a lot of more transformed and creeped in new viruses, it wouldn't really fear me a bit, because a lot of those rumors turned out to be either politics or you don't know what's the hidden agenda. So eventually we will look into a U shape. I would really buckle up and look for another growth. We have already experienced.
Salam, sorry, let me, just in the interest of time, let me ask you very quickly. So in the U shape that you foresee, where are we in that shape right now, according to you?
I think we have passed the horizontal line and curving up towards the vertical line.
Okay, cool. So Susie, coming to you now. V, W, L, S, I don't know, A, B, go for it.
I think I'll go with the U, the same as Salam. I think here in the UK, our vaccination program is well underway. I mean, we're now vaccinating all over 18s here in the UK. Most of us have all had our double vaccines now. We're certainly on a recovery. We still got a furlough scheme, which is where 80% of the wages is paid if you've laid someone off. I think people at the beginning of COVID have perhaps shed extra staff, whereas maybe you had 6 people on a picking line and you probably only need 5. You know, they've already done that shedding now. So I think we are, and our government's very pro, you know, one of their slogans is build back better. We've definitely got a very green government, and the same within Europe, you know, they've got the Green Deal, etc. So I think for the recycling industry, we're definitely moving upwards. We may get a little few bumps, as I say, when the furlough comes off and this kind of thing, but I think on the whole, the only way's up.
And where are we in the U shape, according to you?
Same as Salam. I think we're
same as Salam. Okay, wow, okay.
We're on our way up.
All right, Natallia, what's your view?
I will join this beautiful U theory along with Salam and Susie. Well, because actually I like V-shaped recovery is like the best case scenario, like what we can get. We're definitely past, you know, the bottom line, and we're crawling up. But the V-shaped recovery is a little too optimistic for us so far, in my opinion. But the U is definitely a good description for it, because even though if the COVID does, you know, come back at some point with the new trend or whatever it is, I think the government and the industries itself have built, you know, this sort of base of how we can tackle it and how we can, you know, go ahead with it, even when the country goes in a lockdown, or, you know, there are some other complexities coming up. We know how to handle it. Like, we're okay working from home. Like right now, if countries go on a lockdown, normally the industries, the productions, they don't get closed. So obviously, you know, it's a steady crawl up. So I'll get along with that theory.
Okay, so just to wrap things up, you know, we've had a really interesting comment come in, and it's quite an astute observation, and we can end on that note because it's kind of forward-looking, and I think it's one, as you know, that as an industry we can all sort of look at, and it's and this is coming from a person called Gabriel, who says, you know, the difficulty is having a critical mass of the right quality material to sustain a cost-effective and environmentally efficient local recycling chain. And this bodes well with, you know, the things that you were all saying. He says that it requires a global solution because the technology to recover the material exists, but we need a global solution to be able to make this happen. So Salam's got a... Salam, are you saying bye, or are you saying you want to say something?
I had to outfish the beautiful 2 ladies here before they really catch the last 2 minutes of the session. Now, why I jumped in quickly is because running the right environmental sustainable recycling plant is the way to move forward. And for us to really adopt that model, we do really have to be at least adapting certain principles and certain technologies which BIR has been providing for the past 40, 50 years, maybe of the business. I would like to see everybody who is in this business to be part of the association of BIR, because if we call ourselves professional and sustainable, if I'm an engineer, I better belong to an engineering society. If I'm a doctor, I better belong to a medical society. If we are recyclers, for God's sake, we should really be holding.
Salam, I mean, I'm just going to take it a step back, right? Because a lot of local recyclers can't afford, you know, the BIR kind of membership. But what I would do is expand on your point and say, hey, listen, join your local associations, right? Because your local associations are members of BIR. They can carry your voice forward, but please participate in the industry, participate in your trade associations.
Local association is a national association of BIR.
Yeah.
BMR is here to really host everybody in the November. BIR is to host everybody in October this year. Let's belong to associations which really give us the right path forward and sustainable business models.
Okay, so on that note, if everyone please participate in your associations, make your voice heard, you know, share your ideas with your associations so that they can expand the industry, hopefully fight for it. We have to prevent governments from, ruining the industry. We already know they don't understand it. So, there's a lot of fight, and Swaliha is here to tell us all to get out. So we're going to jump off this call now.
Carry on, please.
So it's never good when the organizer steps in and says, all right, that's it, your time's up. So Swaliha, over to you.
You have a lot of time. You can go on, Sean. It's been a fantastic conversation, and I've been really enjoying every moment of this. And from the questions and comments that have come in, I'm sure the audience also has been enjoying the conversation. We'd love to carry on. If you would like to go on for a few more minutes, nice. That's fine.
This is, in Hindi they say "Mere naam pe ticket faat diya," which is basically, it's to translate it in English, it's like, someone's now thrown me the bait and said, okay, fine, you take the fall for this, which I'm not going to do. We've received messages saying we need to start here, so we'll stop here. I want to thank Susie, Natallia, Salam, Sanjay for your time. It was quite a lively discussion. I hope it was quite useful to the audience. Hopefully we've picked up little tidbits that we can use in our own businesses, and it was, for some of us, it was insightful. Swaliha, you can now make your pitch for tomorrow, and the rest of us will say adios and goodbye.
Thanks a lot,
so first, I would, just a moment. I'd like to thank all of you for a very, very engaging conversation. And Sean, thank you so much for taking on this roundtable as well, and for the Ferris, highly appreciated. And it was a great moderation that happened. So yeah, and this is, as we all know, the last session for metals recycling. And I'd also like to thank all those who are attending various sessions, who have attended various sessions today, and hope you enjoyed the conference. And of course, as Sean already mentioned, the International Recycling Week continues. And tomorrow will be another exciting day with focus on construction and demolition recycling. We have a great program ahead, so all those involved in the sector can join us on the platform at 4 p.m. Dubai time. Thank you all.
Thanks a lot for
thank you all
contribution.
Thank you very much. Thank you.